Can't get enough sports shorts? Tune into Sports Shorts TV on Cox HD Channel 1013 Mondays at 8, Tuesdays at 9, and ETEL Channel 4. That's 52 weeks a year to get educated on sports by the best. Joel Davis and Ronnie Rance.
Welcome, everyone, to this week's edition of Sports Shorts presented by LeBear's Casino in Baton Rouge. LeBear's Casino open 24 hours a day, 365 now, and all their restaurants, the Bon Temps Buffet, Stadium Sports Bar and Grill, 18 Steak, all of it is open. Go by and see them and check them out. Joining me today in place of Mr. Joel Davis, we upgraded, is head coach of the Dunham Tigers, the former district champs, and the 2A high school state coach of the year, Neil Weiner, joining us. How are you, Coach?
Oh, thank you, Ronnie. I'm glad to be here. You know, I'm sure Joel's firing up Twitter. His Twitter game is stronger than mine.
Coach, his Twitter game is on point. You'll get a tweet at like 1 o'clock in the morning. I think I saw my phone light up last night about 2 o'clock. But he's on the road over in Lafayette doing a little Red Zone fundraising today, and that time of the year. And I know you got to be excited because you got some good information yesterday. The LHSA came out at the beginning of the week with some guidelines basically saying that, hey, August 3rd, so next Monday, you guys can kind of start to get back to normal.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, we're excited. We've been asking Mr. Bonine and Eric Held, who's the director for our Coaches Association, to maybe reevaluate the guidelines in Phase 2 to get us ready for football. Mr. Bonine's been pretty consistent. He wants football in the fall. So if that's the case, we got to ease up on some of the restrictions and let us practice some. So next week, we can put on helmets. We can start handing the balls off. We can start doing some 7-on-7. So it's going to start to look like football a little bit more.
Yeah, basically everything but contact.
Right.
You know,
right.
and nowadays it's not like it was when you and I were growing up anyway. You know, there's a lot less. There's no two-a-days. There's no full contact like there used to be. So when I say normal, I mean helmets and 7-on-7 and you know, running drills against dummies. I mean, that's pretty normal.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you watch NFL preseason practices, that's
Sure.
kind of what it looks like. And that's pretty much what we'll have. You know, as long as we're not tackling and wrapping up guys, pretty much everything else is out there for you to do if you're creative enough within the guidelines.
You've been a head coach for most of your career for the last about 16, 17 years. Have you ever had did you ever coach anywhere where you had no spring?
Well, you know what? At the Dunham School, so there's always been a rule with the LHSA. They allow you to not participate in the spring if you want, and you get an extra week. Well, at the Dunham School, my first couple of years, our numbers were pretty low. We only had 30 guys or so, and most of them played baseball or ran track. So it was almost pointless for us to have spring. So we would go without spring, so we could get an extra week in the fall. Now, since then, we've grown. We're consistently around 50 guys on the team, and so we've been doing spring. So we've done that before, but when we've done that, we've had all summer to install things
Sure.
and catch back up, and so we didn't lose anything. So at least in this case, everybody's on an even playing field.
What have you been able to do? I mean, obviously it was middle of March when everybody kind of shut down, and of course Dunham basketball, wins the state championship with no fans,
Right.
In your own gym, which that was bizarre. But my question is what have you been able to do since?
Yeah.
I mean, in basically the 4 months since, how much contact have you been able to have with your players?
Right, so we have to follow the guidelines that the LHSA sent out, but it follows the BESI guidelines that most schools are following anyway. So in Phase 2, the most amount of people you can have in one group is 25. And you have to keep those same 25 groups. It has to be a static group. So the whole summer, the same group of kids have been working out together.
Right.
And so we tried to make sure we had all the linemen in a group and all the skill players in a different group, so that if we wanted to have some passing lines and things like that, we could work some basic things. So, you're allowed to do some individual work. You just can't do it against other players. And so, at least once or twice a week, our different position groups have gotten together to get some work in. We can install some things, but you can't really have the whole team out there installing. So you can use Zoom, What's great is Coach has been using Huddle and using video technology for several years now. So you can share those video clips and those PowerPoint presentations online. So we've been able to install things. We've been able to do some individual work, but we haven't run one whole play together as a team yet.
So, of course, Neil Weiner, the head coach at the Dunham School in Baton Rouge, and has been there since 2014. Prior to the Dunham School, he spent 5 years the head coach at Zachary. you mentioned all the new technology and everything. I mean, look, it doesn't. Gone are the days of, well, I'm 65 years old. I don't really know how to use that technology.
Right.
You've had to during
yeah.
COVID. I think everybody knows how to work Zoom. It's pretty easy, and so you've taken advantage of that technology. Have you had any players or coaches that have said to you, you know what, I'm just not comfortable. I don't feel right. I'm going to sit this one out, or I'm scared about getting the COVID. Have you had to deal with any of that?
We haven't. We've been very fortunate. We haven't had one football. We got this the last week, so knock on wood. We haven't had one football player or football coach has tested positive for COVID this summer. And so I think because we are taking the necessary precautions, it alleviates some of that anxiety that they might have. But we haven't had that at all. Our coaches come around periodically. We've got a set group of coaches that are there every day working with the kids, and then we rotate who comes on other days. But the technology piece has been nice. It's a great function of the Dunham School. Like, technology is the big deal there. So all of our kids, all of our coaches, they're on their MacBooks every single day. That's how we operate. That's how we do everything. We don't have textbooks. We don't have notebooks. So our kids are really comfortable with all those things.
I was teasing you before we started the show. People hear that Weiner name, and of course they think back to your dad.
Yeah.
Louisiana sports. Coaching great. And Neil. Dale Weiner spent how many years at Catholic?
30 years at Catholic High.
30 years at Catholic. Still there teaching,
Yeah,
but
right.
but just not the head football coach. A lot of great players, won a state title, all that sort of thing. And so for years, all your life, you've been, Dale Weiner's son,
Yeah.
or the head coach of wherever you're at, Catholic Point Capee, Zachary, Dunham. And I was teasing, you're about a year away, I think, maybe even 8 months away, for being just Derek Stingley Jr.'s high school football coach. And that's probably going to be that way because this guy's a great player. He's going to be, win all these awards. He's going to play in the NFL forever, barring an injury.
Yeah.
And are you prepared for that switch? No longer Dale Weiner's son, no longer the head football coach at XYZ school. It's Derek Stingley Jr.'s high school coach.
Well, I have been Dale's son for a long time, and if I'm Derek's coach, I'll gladly take that. And pretty soon I'll probably be Matt's dad. I'll never be my own guy, I guess. But no, we're so proud of Derek. We're so excited for him. Everything that he's got, he's earned. Obviously he's been blessed with some great DNA. But even when he was a smaller guy, not the biggest, fastest, and strongest, he was the hardest working kid that we had. And then when it kicked in, oh my gosh, now you get the best player, maybe to ever play in the secondary at LSU, and maybe in the NFL one day.
You were around a lot of greats. Especially in your time at Catholic High, the Travis Miners and the Warwick Dunns and many others, Major Applewhites and whatnot, and a lot of baseball greats.
Yeah.
The David DeLucci's and others, guys that played at the highest level. When did you know? At what age, or what was there a moment that you knew, oh wow, Derek Stingley Jr. is next level. He may be the greatest athlete I've ever coached.
Yeah, I can still remember talking to his dad his ninth grade year before the summer at the end of his ninth grade year in the spring, and he was saying, I think he was kind of feeling me out, wanted to make sure we were on the same page. How good do you think he is? I said, well, I think he's BCS level. I think he's Alabama and LSU. And he said, well, I think so too. And then when all of a sudden he started shooting up, and he was no longer 5'8", 5'9", but now he's 5'11". Now he's 6 foot. Now he's 180 pounds. And the skill set that he had, about midway through his 10th grade year, I thought, like, okay, this is going to be really, really special young man. And then you put just the hunger and thirst for the game that he's got, constantly watching film and picking up little things that wide receivers are doing. His junior year, we played Riverside Academy. And it might have been against the rules, but we had this 6'4" guy that got cut from the Giants who came out and played wide receiver for the scout team. And Derek got beat by him the first day on Monday. And the next day he came back out, and Derek put it on him, and then he didn't get anything on Wednesday. And then they ran the same exact route in the quarterfinal game, tried to run this RPO slant, and Derek read it perfect. And it was everything that he worked on, it was everything that he studied in film. He was patient. He didn't jump it too soon and get the interference call, and he picked off the pass just like that. Those are the kind of little things that just separate the good ones from the great ones.
of all the, obviously his recruitment was super high profile. You got everybody in the country really wanting him. Besides, obviously, we know how the story ends. He ends up going to LSU and had a fantastic freshman year. But who was really in there the most outside of LSU that was really pushing?
Yeah, I tell you what, Penn State was actually, they were down here all the time. Their defensive backs coach came down here just for Derek. And I think that meant something. You know, Derek's dad, he's from Chicago. He's from up north. So Penn State, that means something, you know, when you grow up north. And so I think that had a special thing for him. You know, obviously Alabama really wanted him. But I think early on, Coach Stingley and Little Derek, I think they both felt like that's not where we want to go. And so they were upfront and honest. And I think that helped eliminate a lot of the drama. But I'll be honest with you, I don't think I ever asked Derek, hey, where do you think you're going to go? I don't think I ever had that conversation with him. And I can still remember in the summer on his birthday when he released his commitment video, there was still a little part of me going, is he going to choose LSU?
Right. You weren't sure.
And I was fired up, you know.
Yeah.
So I thought they handled the recruiting deal wonderful because certainly he got tons of attention. There was an article written every single week about him. There was tons of interviews, and I think the whole family did a great job, and Derek was really level-headed the whole time through it.
Obviously, you've grown up in this, you know, high school football recruiting process, seeing what your dad had to handle and go through at Catholic back in when you were growing up in the 90s to now. How has it changed? And I mean, nowadays, you know, we have Mike Scarborough on with TigerBait.com all the time on our show, and you've got so many different services, so many different people out there that are trying to get the inside scoop. Obviously, they don't need you as much as they used to, right? They can go direct to the source with iPhones and videos, Snapchat, all that. So, what do you see a high school coach's role in the recruiting process?
Yeah, I think most of the time, eventually those colleges, if they have a serious interest, if it's a real offer, isn't that crazy? Now there's a non-committable offer.
Right.
Is when they know, hey, this is somebody that we really want. They come and they want to find out the real information about the young man that you're coaching. But the game has definitely changed. You know, I can still remember my dad. We went on a family vacation to visit relatives in North Carolina, and we hit Wake Forest, UNC, and Duke when Mac Brown was at North Carolina at the time. And he's bringing stacks of VHS tapes to show them who Todd White was at the time.
Right.
And, hey, we got this young sophomore, Warwick Dunn and Kevin Franklin. Like, that's what you had to do. And these days with, you know, YouTube and Huddle, I mean, you just text a link and boom, they got whatever they want. And then they've got instant access to the kid or to the parent through, you know, direct messaging and things like that. So the high school coach, his role is definitely taking a step back. Because they're no longer the front man that you have to go through to get a hold of them. Now it's a lot easier to access, which is really positive in some ways, but it can also be kind of negative in some ways, because it used to be coaches could try to protect and kind of weed out some stuff for the kids and the families and help them navigate through that. And now they have to do it all on their own, and they never know who's coming and what's really true and what's sincere. And so it's great that they have that access, and it certainly helps kids out. But it can certainly be a detriment as well.
So you feel like the schools, when they're truly serious, when they have a true offer, because, you know, that's, you know, you and I both know, you know, just because a school calls you, or just because a school sends an email, or just because they invite you on an unofficial visit, doesn't mean that they are offering you a scholarship. They're throwing 100 against the wall and then trying to figure out which 25 they want. And so you're saying that once they get to that point where they know you're one of the 25 and they are making that firm offer, that's where you get involved, where they will start to really dig on the background, or maybe even kind of try to see if they can get you help, depending on if it's a school you want them to go to.
I think most coaches, the way that we handle it, there's a couple of recruiting services that have been around for a long time, and they send questionnaires every single year. It used to be a postcard they would send in. Now it's just an email, and you click on it, you put your information for your kids, and they send it out. And when those college coaches come, they've either got their iPad or they got a big giant binder, and they open it up and say, okay, Dunham, tell me about X, Y, Z. And so that stuff still happens. So we can still help out. But when those coaches say, hey, look, I got to know, can I trust this kid? Is he showing up on time for meetings? You know, how does he work in the weight room? You know, what's he like in the locker room? What do his teachers say about it? Like, they're going to ask those kind of questions when it's real. Shoot, even the NFL does that. You know, my dad still would always tell me about when he'd get letters from NFL coaches and programs saying, hey, tell me about, you know, Warwick Dunn. Tell me about Corey Gaines. Tell me about these guys. And they want to know those kind of things. So they do, when it's real, that's what they're going to do.
He's Neil Weiner. He's the Class 2A High School Football Coach of the Year last year, coming off of a district championship, made it all the way to the semifinals, and they got some great news from the LHSAA that they are now going to be able to kind of get things cranked up on Monday, August the 3rd, per normal, per usual this time of the year, and I know that's exciting for him and all the players and coaches in high school football. We'll take a break. We'll be back more with our conversation, including talking about those Catholic High and Zachary days that kind of led to his stint at Dunham. We'll also talk about some of the players that he's got and the upcoming season for the Dunham Tigers, all that and more. Don't go anywhere. Sports Church will continue, presented by LeBears Casino.
If you're an avid sports fan, then you need to check out the Louisiana Sports Hall of Fame, located in historic downtown Natchitoches, next to the Chateau St. Denis Hotel and the Natchitoches Convention Center. The Louisiana Sports Hall of Fame is where the rich history of Louisiana sports is told through the pictures, artifacts, and by the legends themselves in video archives. Come to the Louisiana Sports Hall of Fame and Northwest Louisiana History Museum and visit a world-renowned architectural marvel. For more information and to purchase tickets to the annual Louisiana Sports Hall of Fame events, visit lasportshall.com/purchase.
Welcome back, everyone, to Sports Church, presented by LeBears Casino. Neil Weiner joining me. High school football is right around the corner. Hopefully, college and pro as well. It's just, it's weird. You know, people ask you. I'm sure they ask me. Well, what do you know? What do you hear? Football season. Who knows?
Yeah,
you know, right? Like
right.
Whatever you know today could change tomorrow.
Absolutely.
I mean,
it could change tonight. You know?
Change tonight.
I mean, it has. You know, coaches, we all text and communicate, hey, what are you hearing? What's going on? Eric Held with the LHSCA put together a football advisory committee group of coaches that met with Mr. Bonine the last 3 weeks. So each Thursday we would kind of talk and discuss every week it was a new conversation. So no, we really don't know, but we're all planning. Hey, we'll start next week. We're going to start doing a little football, and as soon as the governor clears us to phase 3, we'll get ready to play some real football.
I know that a lot of this conversation is just speculation, but that's what we're doing right now. I mean, it's not, with minimal sports,
that's
a
right.
lot of it's speculation. But what is your takeaway on fans or no fans for high school football? Do you see a scenario where maybe they start out with no fans, and if things go well, they phase them in, or what do you think?
I think we're going to have fans. We may be limited on how many fans can be there. We're probably going to have to designate areas in bleachers where fans can sit. We got to follow the state's guidelines on that. So, whatever that is, 250 people, I think, right now at an outdoor gathering is allowed. So certainly we'd like to have more than that,
Sure.
paying customers for a football game. But, hopefully that'll get expanded once we're playing real football.
What's the usual number for a Dunham obviously you got your high and your low. Your Episcopal
sure.
game's going to bring in more than that. But a normal Dunham Friday night high school football game, how many fans do you put in the stands?
Yeah, we're going to be close to 1,000 on a typical game. When it's Episcopal, it's going to probably be close to double that. When we play some of these smaller schools that don't have great support, it may be a lot smaller than that. But typically in that 750 to 1,000 range for us for a two-way.
So if you're having to play, 250 is a quarter of what you normally get. I mean, that affects the
big time.
The numbers.
Yeah, absolutely.
I know you want to have fans, and I think that there is a way, right? I mean, obviously, football stadiums are big enough where you could put an orange X and go a few feet, put another orange X, and just tell people pick an X, right? To sit on it. But the fact that in March we played state championship basketball games with no fans leads me to believe that there's precedent for, hey, we can move on without fans, which is something that college, the NFL or the big, but high school football. I mean, those dollars and cents, those concessions, and the Friday night, even only 1,000 fans.
Yeah.
When you're talking about 1,000 times $10 or 1,000, and then another 10 a person at the concession stand. I mean, that's $20,000 potentially on a Friday night. You're losing.
Yeah.
That's a big deal financially for schools.
Absolutely. Well, Skip Burtman would be he'd be rolling over.
That's right.
He'd be upset if there was no concession stand, right? You got to make that money. But no, and look, take the finances out of it. High school football, it's like a family reunion every Friday night. You get people that are going to come in town because they want to watch the Tigers play or the Eagles or the Bears or whoever. It's what they do, So, man, we just need that. That's why the game is so special. And then the financial part of it is definitely big. Some schools, we're fortunate at a private school where we've got some funds that'll help us get through a season. We don't have to rely on that gate. But we certainly, we need it for other things. But you got some of our local public schools, and they are relying on that gate on a Friday night to help them sustain the volleyball program, the cross country program, the basketball and soccer team. So all of our schools, we need that on Friday nights.
Yeah, I mean, let's face it, especially with the expense of putting on a game and, a lot of times renting stadiums and you got personnel. I mean, even though you might bring in this big gross number, the net isn't always that big. So, yeah, definitely a lot of schools out there will be suffering mightily if in fact it doesn't happen. A couple of months ago, there was a lot of conversation, and we know that some states have opted to either A, not play high school football at all this fall, or B, move football to the spring.
Yeah.
Heck, we've seen the Southwest Athletic Conference and the MEAC, they're moving football. The Ivy League moving football to the spring. Did that ever gain any real traction, conversation, and what was your thoughts on possibly moving the season?
Well, originally, Mr. Bonon said it's a non-starter. And then all of a sudden, well, maybe we can push back the season a couple of weeks. And then, hey, every option needs to be on the table. So I think as we've looked at the situation and you start thinking about having to look those kids in the eye and say, hey, we're going to tell you in advance you're not going to get to play. Nobody wants to do that. I don't think any coach says, hey, we need to go play football in the spring. I mean, if you're going to be selfish about the football season, well, that's not good because then in 2 months later you're going to play another season. And what if one of your junior players, tears his ACL in the spring and now he can't play his senior year? So nobody wants that. If you're a baseball coach, your kids have been throwing all summer, and now you're going to want to come right back now in September and play again, and then you're not going to see them again until the summer. So, none of that is good. Nobody wants that. Football coaches want to play football in the fall. That's the boys of fall. The old Kenny Chesney song. I mean, that's what it's for. Here's where I struggle, and I think where football coaches struggle and still talk about possibly swapping is, if we went back to July 2019 and we said, hey, there's a virus coming, and we're not going to be able to play baseball in the spring, I think every coach would say, well, cut my season short, let y'all play sooner and get your season in, right? Well, now we're looking at it. There's a good chance we might not be able to play football in the fall. And so we're going to go ahead and say we're going to sacrifice y'all's season and not let you go play in the fall. Go play in the spring. That's difficult for me to have to say that we chose that.
Right.
We didn't choose to shut down spring sports. We had to. Now we get a choice because we've got time to plan, and I think that's the part that coaches struggle with. If we could find a way to let those kids play their last year of football, because you're gonna have some recruits that are gonna say, "I'm not doing it.
Sure,
I got too much on the line," and I get that. but 9 out of 10 players are never going to put on a football uniform again.
Yeah.
They're not going to have that opportunity.
9.5 out of 10.
Yeah, exactly. So,
Right.
man, I struggle looking at my seniors and say, you don't get that chance. And shoot, I've got a son who's a junior. I don't want him to miss a game of his junior season either. But I want football in the fall. I think if we delay the season by a couple of weeks and we still get to play our season, I think that's great,
Let me throw out a scenario, because through the conversations about whether to push back the start of football season in the high school level, at least in Louisiana, or to move it or whatnot, it's always been the caveat that, well, we're going to be able to do volleyball, we're going to be able to do men's and women's basketball or soccer, we're going to be able to do these other cross country, we're going to be able to do these other fall sports, but football is the one, because of the contact and the numbers and all that, that's the one that gets all the attention. But they're not talking about moving into the other sports.
Right.
To that I say, well, if you're going to do these other sports, you might as well do football, because I don't know that it's a whole lot of different. I mean, I played high school basketball. Trust me, I think I got hurt more playing basketball and had more physical contact there than I did football. But my question would be this: if you run into a scenario where, like we're seeing in Major League Baseball, where, hey, got some COVID spikes, they shut down a couple games while they're figuring out the real numbers and all that. If all of a sudden there's a scenario where the LHSA treats the beginning of the season like a hurricane, which we've dealt with many times, and instead of week 1 and 2 being canceled due to a hurricane, it's canceled because of COVID. Would you rather, and I guess I'm asking to speak for you and the players, would you rather have the full season and maybe take out some of the playoffs, or cancel would it be more advantageous for players to have a 10-game season and a district championship, but state championships go away? Or would you rather only play 5 or 6 games and still have the normal playoffs? What do you think is that's a big decision.
Sure. So we've talked about a bunch of different scenarios behind closed doors and trying to plan some of those things out. I mean, first of all, if you look at the playoffs right now, the public school side has 5 rounds and the private school has 4 rounds, and really for most of them it's only 3, right? Because they're going to get buys on top of that. So why not put everybody at 3 rounds and play 7 regular season games and then do 3 rounds of the playoffs? Or, hey, let's go ahead and do 5 regular season games and then play the full playoffs, but let all those schools that don't qualify for the playoff, they get to play in a bowl game, They get to keep all that money, and they don't have to turn it over to the LHSA, so it gives them a chance to get another gate in. They can split it 50-50. So there's a lot of different things that I think that you could do. I think what would hurt is if we say we're going to extend the season, say, into January, right? Well, now are you going to bump back basketball because all those kids are going to have to miss basketball season? Well, if you bump back basketball, then you got to bump back baseball. And I'm speaking about football and the boys' sports, but we'd have to do the same thing for girls' basketball and girls' soccer and girls' softball. So, I don't think our principals are going to be in favor of playing high school sports throughout the month of June. So we're going to have to find a way to end whatever this first season is, the fall season. It's going to have to end before Christmas, probably.
Right. Well, the other reason in my mind to where you don't want to deal with Christmas and the holidays is that's a COVID spike situation, right? You're going to have people generally during the holidays. They spend a lot of time in small spaces with a lot of family and friends, and they travel all over, and so you not that it will happen, but you risk, hey, breaking up your guys, sending them around, and then coming back and possibly somebody's getting sick and infecting the locker room that maybe you were able to keep sterile for 4 months, and now all of a sudden it's tainted. It is an interesting dilemma. I would say, I think back to, when I was a senior in high school, I think I would rather have my full slate of games, for sure, my district, and be able to play for a championship, or go to a district champs only, kind of, make it to the playoffs. I like that scenario. I just hate to see players only get a handful of games and then they don't make the playoffs and that's it.
Yeah. Well, the other thing that we're dealing with right now, East Baton Rouge has said they're not going face-to-face school until after Labor Day at least. Jefferson Parish, Orleans Parish has done the same thing. I think Tangipahoa Parish has done that. I think Calcasieu maybe.
Does that do the private schools have to follow that mandate?
No. So if those school systems are saying we don't want our kids face-to-face, we're certainly not going to want them face-to-face for football
Friday
practice,
night,
right?
Yeah.
But the private schools will be in school and we'll be practicing. So I think that's probably going to draw a little ire from people, and we're going to end up having some type of rule that's going to come out and say, okay, nobody's going to do anything until after Labor Day.
Right.
And so I looked at that and mapped that out, and you could reduce everybody's seasons, fall, winter, and spring, by 30%, so basically 3 weeks. and you could be done by Thanksgiving for football season before there's a big spike, and then basketball would end in March, and then baseball would end in May. Everybody would just start a little bit later, and then everybody gets a chance to have a season in. But yeah, there's so many different scenarios. We just need to get to phase 3,
Right.
and then pretty shortly after that, we're going to be playing real football.
I hate to bring up this question, but you just put it on the table there. If the private schools are able to kind of go do their own thing,
Yeah.
if they're able to go to class and they're able to practice, and they're not required by law to follow the parish public school rule structure, whatever parishes they happen to be, couldn't on the fly, private schools say, we're just going to play each other this year.
Yeah, well, that would have to be approved with the LHSA. So, we would still fall under LHSA guidelines. So, if the LHSA came out and said, "Hey, we've added an addendum to the football rules this year, while schools are locked down in the public school system, you're not allowed to do this," well, then we'd have to follow that.
Gotcha.
But if they didn't, we certainly could. I mean, we could certainly change our schedule. We're playing, Northeast, and Northeast is shut down at the time. We could call up Menard and Ash and, hey, let's play,
Right.
But that would all have to be approved by the LHSA. So it wouldn't be like a renegade deal.
Well, we'll ask Eddie Bonine. We'll
There you
ask
go.
him that question. He'll be on Sports Shorts next week, the LHSA commissioner, and we'll ask him. I'm sure they're dealing with the questions as they come,
Yeah.
because as we mentioned, it's literally changing on a day-to-day basis. But we'll ask him. Hey, because it makes sense to me that unless the LHSAA and you made it clear that, hey, we follow. The private schools follow the LHSAA guidelines, not the public school district guidelines. So the LHSAA, from a sports standpoint, they follow those guidelines. But if the LHSAA doesn't get involved and they don't have they don't say anything, then it opens up the private schools rather to scrimmage or jamboree or whatever until the time comes that you could play.
Yeah, no, I've
LHSAA
already
games.
heard of some schools that have already started calling teams from outside of the state of Louisiana
Sure.
to say, hey, look, if we're not allowed to play these public schools, are you available to play this week?
Does the LHSAA have reach when it comes to you playing an out-of-state school? Do they have jurisdiction on that?
Well, we're still an LHSA school, so
Right.
it would have to be an
But
LHSA.
do they have say, meaning, if you play a state Stanislaus
Right.
out of Bay St. Louis, do they have any jurisdiction to say you can or can't play them? That would be my question.
Yeah,
I'll
so
put that
we-
on the list. That's
Yeah.
on the list for next.
So we
next
can play.
week
We
we
can
have
play
Eddie
them
here.
in the regular season,
Right.
Like we've done that in the past. My first year at Dunham, Miles Brennan was a sophomore starting quarterback at St. Santa. We went down there and played there. So
How'd that go? How'd y'all do?
we were pretty close. We went in there dressed out 27, all playing both ways. It was crazy. We were taking IVs at halftime. So were the coaches. They got us by 2 touchdowns, but we could tell he was going to be good. So we could normally play them. And so if the LHSA doesn't come out and say, hey, you can't play any games right now, then we're going to try to find some football games.
How did Stingley Jr. do against Miles Brennan? Did he get it? Did he?
So that was my first year. So he was an 8th grader.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
he was an 8th grader at the time. And I think, as a matter of
That
fact, he
goes to show you how long Miles Brennan's been around.
That's
huh?
right. That's right. And Derek, he wasn't dressing out for the varsity at that
Right,
point.
right.
It was about 3 weeks later. We said, that's enough of that middle school stuff. Come on up and play with us.
Right.
Yeah.
He's Neil Weiner, the head coach over at the Dunham School in Baton Rouge. We'll take the time out and continue on with our conversation. Sports Shorts presented by LeBares Casino. Don't go anywhere.
If you're an avid sports fan, then you need to check out the Louisiana Sports Hall of Fame, located in historic downtown Natchitoches, next to the Chateau Saint Denis Hotel and the Natchitoches Convention Center. The Louisiana Sports Hall of Fame is where the rich history of Louisiana sports is told through the pictures, artifacts, and by the legends themselves in video archives. Come to the Louisiana Sports Hall of Fame and Northwest Louisiana History Museum and visit a world-renowned architectural marvel. For more information and to purchase tickets to the annual Louisiana Sports Hall of Fame events, visit lasportshall.com/purchase.
Welcome back, everyone, to Sports Shorts over at LeBair's Casino. Starting in July, the rooftop pool at LeBair's Casino in Baton Rouge is 21 and over. So no rugrats running around, nobody spraying you in the face with those water guns, anything like that. You can go up there, get a room at LeBair's, and enjoy a great rooftop bar and one of the best views in all of Baton Rouge. And, of course, all the restaurants fully open at LeBair's Casino, the Great Bon Ton Buffet and 18 Steak, one of my favorite restaurants in the city. Go by and check them out. Joining me is Neil Weiner, the head coach over at the Dunham School. And like all the high school football coaches in Louisiana, it has been a crazy last 4 months. But now some clarity coming this August 3rd, this upcoming Monday. They'll be able to start practicing and with the helmets on and 7-on-7 and kind of getting back to somewhat normal. When you talk to your brothers in arms around the state, are there certain areas that are having it tougher than others? Certain high school parishes or whatnot that are tougher than others?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think if you look around the state where the virus is more active, like New Orleans, they're a lot more nervous, stressed out, anxious, a little more dejected than if you talk to somebody, say, up in North Louisiana. We've got schools that are in kind of rural areas and the virus really isn't hitting them and they can't understand what is all this stuff about. And you get other guys going, I don't even know why we're talking about football. I'm worried about my wife. So it's you hit the full spectrum when you talk to guys. I think, in Baton Rouge, I think people are a little more in between. Most people are like, hey, let's just get going. Things are going to get better. But definitely, I've got friends that coach New Orleans, and it's a whole different time down there. They're worried that the mayor's going to put them back in phase 1,
right?
And so they're really nervous because that does not bode well for football if that's the case for them.
I want to get people caught up on your kind of path to where you are now. Of course, Hall of Fame coach Dale Weiner, and your first job, assistant coach over at Catholic High. Or Redemptorist, rather, right? You spent time at Redemptorist, Catholic, Central, Baton Rouge as an assistant coach. Why the high school route? Why, when you were a young guy with all the connections, did you not go college? What was the decision there?
Well, you know what? I actually had the privilege to work for Coach Donardo and his staff while I was at LSU. Bill Elias was the recruiting coordinator and tight ends coach.
I hadn't heard that name in a long time. Bill Elias.
That's right. Erie, Pennsylvania. and so, man, I loved it. I thought it was the greatest thing ever. I loved the recruiting aspect of it, the work that they had me do. Basically, I would take every VHS tape that would come in from high school recruits. I'd find out which coach was assigned to it. I would give a quick evaluation if it was an obvious walk-on candidate, not somebody they were going to recruit. I had this form letter I'd send out, and then I'd go bring the film to them. And then, some of the guys, they would have watched the film with me and go, hey, what were you looking at? I want to, they kind of feel you out. So it was awesome. And when Coach Saban got there, Jimbo Fisher, he was great. Every quarterback film that came in, I'd sit right there with Jimbo, and he'd talk to it. So, man, it was awesome. I thought that's what I wanted to do. And then LSU lost to Ole Miss after they beat Florida, and the Donardo era started singing.
That was the 11 a.m. game.
Yeah.
All
right.
Yeah.
So all of a sudden everything started tanking, and you could just working up in the office, just the stress level that those coaches were dealing with, the hours they were putting in the month of March. I'm just looking around going, oh my gosh, how do y'all do this? And how are you a husband and a father? Because I looked at my dad. I mean, he was busy, but man, he was there. He was present in my life. And I'm looking at these coaches like, do they even know their kids' names?
Right.
And right around the same time, I fell in love. Women, they ruin everything. And I started thinking about those kind of things. And so I looked at it. I was like, man, this is rough. It's not all, sunshine and rainbows. And, man, my dad had a pretty good life and did some pretty great things. And so I decided at that point I wanted to do the high school thing. And it's been great ever since.
You mentioned, breaking down tapes and all that. Okay, do you have a story? Do we have one that got away? Meaning like, is there a, hey, I really like this guy, and but they went in a different direction. It turned out the dude ended up being, Tom Brady. Is there? Do we have a story?
No Tom Brady, but I know that Julius Peppers was obvious. He was awesome, but he was a running back in high school too. So he's 6'6". 220-pound running back /
Christian
defensive
Okoye.
end.
Remember Christian Okoye?
He was unbelievable.
The Nigerian nightmare running back in the 90s. He was
I
a big
still
guy
remember
like
their pants. They were white pants, but they had like this stripe that went here and then came across the knee. Like it just still sticks out of him running over people. So I'll always remember that. But then, man, I hate to put Mike Haywood on the spot here.
Go ahead.
He was running backs coach. So that same year, they had Travis Minor, here in Baton Rouge.
Sure.
They had Jasper Sanks, who was in Georgia.
Yep.
He was the other top running back. And then they had Jamal Lewis, who was coming out of Atlanta. And Jamal Lewis was on a visit.
Who ended up going to Tennessee.
Tennessee, played in the NFL, had to not get hurt. I mean, he was phenomenal.
Great player,
Won a Super Bowl, I think, with the Ravens.
He
maybe.
did, yeah.
He was awesome. And I remember him sitting at the table, like with his mom or whoever came with him, and they were bored to tears or whatever. And so I went and grabbed Coach. It's like, hey, nobody's with the Lewis kid. He was like, I know he's a fullback anyway. Don't worry about it. What? He was awesome. He turned out to be great. Now, they ended up, recruiting some pretty good running backs.
He's a fullback. Don't worry about it.
They ended up having a pretty good run of running backs at LSU. So it wasn't like we were hurting without him. But I still remember, I don't know, man. He's pretty good.
Right. Oh, that's too funny. That is too funny. I tell you, you mentioned Skip's name earlier. I tell you, the one that got away, Skip story, right? And I had a great lunch with Skip last week. Roger Cador and Buzzy Heidel. The four of us had lunch together at Mike Anderson's and told some great stories, and it was good to see those guys. And Skip, so in the late 80s, Smoke Laval was assistant coach, and so Smoke goes on like a 2-week recruiting trip, to Midwest, and probably in the summer or something. And he's got a list of guys, and he's going all through the Midwest and going to see players. So he comes back. They have their meeting to go through. Tell me what you thought of this guy, that guy. So they're going through the list. Johnson. Right-handed pitcher, 6'5", Iowa. Whatever. And Smoke's like, yeah, he's all right. He's like 85, 88, and he's got a good slider. Blah 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 blah. Okay, and so Skip's like, okay, all right, next guy, Abbott, left-handed pitcher, Michigan. And Smoke's like, he's really good. I mean, this guy's a 3-sports all-state performer. But there's one problem, Stanley. And Skip's like, oh, what is it? Sounds great. I mean, 6'5", lefty. What's the problem? He goes, well, he's only got one hand. And Skip goes, what? He goes, yeah, he's only got one hand. He's got a nub on the right hand, and he's got Skip. Listen, prerequisite. If they're going to play here at LSU, they got to have 2 hands. Next guy. And of course, it turns out to be
great.
Jim Abbott.
Yes.
Who Skip, who played at Michigan, was a great player, and Skip actually coached him
Team USA,
on the Olympic team in '88 when they won a gold medal. Ben McDonald on that team.
I think I still have the card.
That's right. And as it turns out, Jim Abbott became a great dear friend of Beetle Bailey, Coach Beetle Bailey, because he had a grandson born with one hand, and there was a connection there, and through Skip. And, of course, Jim Abbott ended up playing in the major leagues a long time, threw a no-hitter with the Yankees. I think a perfect game with the Yankees. So, don't ever judge a book by its cover, and make sure if on the recruiting end you do your due diligence, right?
That's pretty good. I love it.
All right, we'll take a break. We'll come back. Our final segment of Sports Shorts presented by LeBear's Casino. Joining me today is Neil Weiner, the head coach of the Dunham School. The Tigers going after their back to how many district titles in the since you've been there?
Last 3 years.
3 years in a row.
3 years.
And
one previously. So we've had some good players come through.
And a
years.
tremendous playoff win on a Hail Mary against the Menard Eagles, my alma mater, 3 years ago? Something like that?
That was my first year.
Oh, was it your first year?
Yeah, first year.
Unbelievable. We'll talk about that. Well, reluctantly. When we come back, don't go anywhere. We'll be back with Sports Shorts right after this.
If you're an avid sports fan, then you need to check out the Louisiana Sports Hall of Fame, located in historic downtown Natchitoches, next to the Chateau Saint Denis Hotel and the Natchitoches Convention Center. The Louisiana Sports Hall of Fame is where the rich history of Louisiana sports is told through the pictures, artifacts, and by the legends themselves in video archives. Come to the Louisiana Sports Hall of Fame and Northwest Louisiana History Museum and visit a world-renowned architectural marvel. For more information and to purchase tickets to the annual Louisiana Sports Hall of Fame events, visit lasportshall.com/purchase.
Welcome back. Final segment of Sports Shorts presented by LeBair's Casino. Joining me, Neil Weiner. Of course, the Weiner name, legendary name in the Baton Rouge area. Longtime coach Dale Weiner, who coached some great teams. I remember going and watching Catholic High. I remember in the early '90s going to, I think, Memorial to watch Catholic High when Warwick Dunn played quarterback and Franklin played tailback. I remember going and watching a couple big games there and seeing this little 5'7" guy do what he did was incredible. I also remember going to West Monroe when y'all played for the semifinals in the late '90s, and that's when Major Applewhite was at quarterback. But of course, they had the nemesis Tommy Banks, touchdown Tommy Banks, and he lined up 2 yards behind the quarterback and just plowed forward 4 yards, and that was a big crowd and a fun game. You ran Franklin returned the kickoff.
Travis Minor,
that's right. Returned the kickoff to start the game, and of course it quieted that big huge crowd. But then the rest of the way, West Monroe was pretty good back then.
That's right, yeah, absolutely.
And I also the other game I remember was in '99, I believe, was West Monroe coming here. Beating Catholic, right?
Jason Ledoux and
Brian West.
Brian West, right. Brady James,
pretty good group. So some great games over the years. Your dad still, many people don't realize this, but he's not retired. He's still coaching.
Yeah, he's still teaching. That's right. Still teaching full time. Does civics and health.
It's incredible
over at Catholic High. I mean, he's a I don't think he'll ever retire.
Yeah, I mean, really? I mean, you think he'll just keep doing it till?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, he loves it. Every single day. They love him. It's good to have a man like that with those kids all the time. And they got a great coaching staff over there now that's obviously doing a fantastic job. But having Catholic High without Dale Weiner around just doesn't feel right for the guys that are my age or older, for sure.
I'll tell you, I said this to your dad one last time I saw him. One of our dear friends, Boots Garland, passed away a few years ago, and Boots Garland, who was a speed coach and legendary figure, personality, actor, you name it, who got a Super Bowl ring with the Cowboys and a World Series ring with the Dodgers. And I got to know him. He worked with Coach Bertman the first probably 10 years that Coach Bertman was in Baton Rouge. He was the speed coach for LSU, and just one of my favorite human beings. And when he passed away 2-3 years ago, your dad gave the eulogy at the funeral. It was one of the best eulogies I mean I've ever been to. It was so fantastic. He had coached. I think Boots had coached him in high school at Baton Rouge High.
Baton Rouge High.
And so he did a fantastic job. You kind of broke away. You told the story about how you decided, you fell in love. Look, college coaching isn't for me. It takes up too much time. I want to do the high school thing. I've been able to see my dad manage his life via that way. So you kind of start your own path. And the first time you were the head coach was at Catholic Point Capee.
That's right.
And being a friend of Clayton Jumonville's, I know all about Catholic Point Capee back in the day. But going from these big-time schools and, of course, Catholic High to little bitty Catholic Point Capee, who at that time was kind of struggling. What was that like? And boy, you turned it around because I think y'all had a couple back-to-back undefeated seasons.
Yeah, we ended up having a great time there. I mean, we had an unbelievable coaching staff. So when I first got there, David Brewerton was our offensive line coach. Kenny Langlois coached quarterbacks. Kenny's the offensive coordinator at Zachary, does an incredible job. Chad Mahaffey was the offensive coordinator the first year.
Now the head coach at Walker.
Now at Walker, and had tons of success. Rob Funderburk was the defensive coordinator, became the head coach there. And we had some younger guys that are now great coach. Aaron Weiss, who's now the offensive coordinator for Coach Mahaffey at Walker.
Was Jeff Lanoux already gone? I think he was at Redemptress then.
Jeff was not there. We crossed paths at Redemptress for 1 year.
Right.
But so we had an incredible coaching staff. So and then they had a really good young group of kids. So it was just kind of the perfect timing. A great support system, and we did. The first year we went 3-7, then we went 4-5 because of Katrina. We lost a game, and then the next year we went 10-0 and won district championships. And we lost to Chad Jones and the rivals Katrina All Stars that all came up from New Orleans and came up to Southern Lab that next year. So that was pretty tough sledding, but. Yeah, we had a great run there. I was at Redemptress for 4 years as an assistant with Sid, with a lot of those same coaches, and obviously Guy Mastretta. So that was awesome. When I decided I wanted to become a high school coach, I just assumed I'd do it at Catholic High. I graduated there. I was student body president, man of the year. I've been coaching freshman football there, and I went to meet with the principal and said, "I've decided I want to teach and coach. What do I need to do to get hired at Catholic High?" And he said, "Well, we have a nepotism policy. You can't." So I was like, "Oh, well, thanks a lot."
Didn't know that.
So I said, "Okay, well, I'll go to the other Catholic school in town that's building." So I went to Redemptress, and then the rest has just been phenomenal.
What did you learn? And give me a little quick snippet because I'm going to ask you about a couple of different people. Sid Edwards, great basketball coach. People don't know that. Great basketball coach. Had a lot of success as a head coach at Redemptress. Well known that he's more of a program builder as far as an X's and O's. But what did you take away and learn from your time with Sid?
I think probably three things. He's a people builder. Like, he builds people up, and I think that's why people gravitate towards him. And it's not the superstar players, although he's had some good players over the years. It's the guys that get forgotten. It's the equipment managers. It's the guys walking around the halls that don't do anything at all, and he finds a way for them to get involved. So that's one. He reads constantly. I used to hate to read, but Sid was always reading. He would give me books, and so that's that. And then delegation. It's something that I still struggle with. My dad was always a go-getter. He was always doing everything, and a lot of that was because they didn't have the coaching staff at Catholic High when he first got there that they do now, and so he had to do everything because everybody else was doing their other jobs. So Sid was able to delegate things and train those people up. So those things I really learned from him.
You went on to Zachary, and you kind of got there right about the time that Zachary was blowing up.
Yep.
From a facility standpoint, athletes and all that. You went from at some point being the Catholic Point Capee head coach on the smallest level, and now you're at the biggest level with all the toys. What was your time like those 5 years at Zachary?
It was special. It really was. It was great. I had it in my mind. My dad was a 5A head coach. I said, I got to be a 5A head coach. And there was this awesome new school district that had been killing it, academically. It's a great community. I said, man, I got to get that job. And I ended up getting the job. And it was great. But after about 2 or 3 years, I started going, man, I miss the small school feel. Like, I had 3 kids in the Zachary school system, all going to 3 different schools. I wouldn't see them forever. And I'm going, man, if I was at Catholic Point Capee, they'd be coming to school with me every day. I could go walk down and go eat lunch with them. And I know every single mom and dad. I remember at Zachary, I had a dad that was really upset with me one year, and I never knew why. Because he said I passed him somewhere and didn't acknowledge him. Well, I didn't even know who he was. I got 140 kids in the program. I can't know, and I like to have that kind of interaction. Sure. And so I started looking at those things, and as great as Zachary was, and this vision we had is funny. I wrote all these things down. We're going to play on national television, ESPN. We're going to beat West Monroe. We're going to win state championships. All those things happened after I left, right?
Right.
But we were starting to go on that path. And we, my last year there, Lindsey Scott, we had 5 or 6 sophomore starters. We had another 5 or 6 junior starters. It was a smaller senior class, and so my football friends were going, man, what in the world are you doing?
Sure.
I just felt like this is where God has me going for my family and it's the way that I grew up. I drove to school with my dad every single day. I had my sisters with me, up until high school at least, every single day. It's just kind of the way that I was raised, and I loved it. And so I wanted that for my kids. And so I can still remember, tears in my eyes telling the team that they were leaving, but I had a pretty good idea that David Brewerton was going to be the next coach. And I was like, guys, everything that we've talked about doing is going to happen. If you will put your trust and faith in this guy coming, I'm telling you, he's going to take it to the next level. Their coaching staff has stayed pretty much the same.
Right.
Brew came in, gave them that spark, and they've been awesome.
They've been fantastic, and yeah, I've said this for years, even going back to when you were there. The coaching staff at Zachary is top 3 in the state.
Awesome.
It really is. All the veterans and how everybody gets along and all the delegation and everything. You mentioned the word Lindsey Scott. You had him. He's now going to be the head quarterback at Nichols this year. What are the Colonel fans going to see out of him? What kind of person is he in quarterback?
Well, he's a tremendous leader. He's even as a 10th grader, and he was brand new to the school. We had to kind of phase him in a little bit, And the second half of the season, he took over the team. It was his team, and that's why we kind of went on a great run and ended up losing the quarterfinals to Brandon Harrison Parkway in a shootout. And then he carried that on the next 2 years. He's extremely bright, intelligent, hard-working guy. He is a great runner, but he is a fantastic thrower of the football. He's passes for action. He's got a strong arm, and I think his running ability overshadows the passing part. He's a total package.
It's a shame, I thought he was making a mistake out of high school when he signed with LSU. It's hard to turn down LSU when you're a Baton Rouge guy, kind of knowing he was a throw-in. They were going to have other players probably better talented, but he probably wasted a couple years where had he gone to a Nichols or someplace a little lower level, even UL Lafayette even. I think he would have been a three-year starter at a school like that.
Tulane, Willie Fritz running that offense, I thought would have been really good.
One last thing before we go. We got about 30 seconds. LSU fans, year 2 of Derek Stingley Jr., what can he do to get better? What has he done to get better from year 1 to year 2?
Well, I know scheme-wise, I know he's excited about Coach Pelini's new scheme they're doing, and that's not a knock on Coach Aranda because certainly they play good defense the last few years. But I think they're going to allow him to do a few more things defensively, maybe blitzing off the edge, mixing in some zone coverage. And so he'll be able to kind of expand that repertoire a little bit.
Will he get to return punts? Is he thinking he's going to get to do some of that?
I think so. I haven't asked him that. I get to talk to his dad because he's on our staff. But and I believe he'll still be doing the punt returns. And I know there's rumors about playing offense. But
we'll see.
If they've got enough balls to go around to not throw them all to Jamar Chase and Terrace Marshall, I'd like to see.
Thanks for the time and best of luck this season if there is one. I'm fingers crossed. Fingers crossed. He's Neil Weiner. Go check him out this fall. The Dunham School's going to have a heck of a team. We'll be back with more Sports Shorts next week. Have a good one, everybody.
If you're an avid sports fan, then you need to check out the Louisiana Sports Hall of Fame, located in historic downtown Natchitoches, next to the Chateau St. Denis Hotel and the Natchitoches Convention Center. The Louisiana Sports Hall of Fame is where the rich history of Louisiana sports is told through the pictures, artifacts, and by the legends themselves in video archives. Come to the Louisiana Sports Hall of Fame and Northwest Louisiana History Museum and visit a world-renowned architectural marvel. For more information and to purchase tickets to the annual Louisiana Sports Hall of Fame events, visit lasportshall.com/purchase.
Can't get enough sports shorts? Tune into Sports Shorts TV on Cox HD Channel 1013 Mondays at 8, Tuesdays at 9, and ETEL Channel 4. That's 52 weeks a year to get educated on sports by the best. Joel Davis and Ronnie Rance.